Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony, which today commemorates the 75th anniversary of D-Day and the Normandy landings. My name is Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is able seaman Philip Armstrong. Today marks the 75th anniversary of the Allied landings along the Normandy coastline, known as D-Day. D-Day and the Battle of Normandy marked the first step in the Allied liberation of Europe from Nazi occupation, involving the largest armada of ships ever assembled and more than 10,000 support aircraft. D-Day was the culmination of years of planning and preparation. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill described it as much the greatest thing we have ever attempted. Australians played a small but important role as part of the Allied forces that participated in D-Day. Approximately 3,200 Australians participated in the D-Day landings on the 6th of June. Thousands more would serve during the Normandy campaign and beyond. Some 500 members of the Royal Australian Navy served on attachment with the Royal Navy. A small number of Australian soldiers served on the ground with the British Army. Our nation's main contribution came in the air, where approximately 1,000 Australian airmen flew with the Royal Australian Air Force squadrons, and a further 1,800 operated on attachment to the Royal Air Force. 10,000 Australians waited in training and reserve pools, ready to join operational squadrons as casualties mounted. 13 Australians were killed on the 6th of June while participating in Operation Overlord, and hundreds more would be killed over the course of the campaign, flying in support of the ground forces. In June 1944 was the worst month in the history of the Royal Australian Air Force in terms of total casualties. In tribute to them and all Australians who served throughout the war, the Australian War Memorial recognises and remembers their contributions to one of the most monumentous events of the 20th century. We will soon hear the story of one of those men, Flight Sergeant Malcolm Robert Burgess, a Lancaster tail gunner who was killed when his aircraft was shot down while supporting the Allied landings in Normandy. This evening, we're honoured to welcome Mr. Lawrence Woods, AMDFC. Mr. Woods served in the Royal Australian Air Force as a bomb aimer with number 460 Squadron during the D-Day operations and Normandy landings. We're also honoured to acknowledge this evening the Honourable Darren Chester, Minister for Veterans and Defence Personnel, Vice Admiral David Johnston, Vice Chief of Defence Force, Mr. Gordon Ramsay, ACT Minister for Seniors and Veterans, Brigadier Marcus Simpson, Defence Attaché, British High Commission, and Mr. John King, President of the Returned and Services League of Australia, ACT branch. We also warmly welcome members of the Royal Australian Engineers Association who are joining us this evening. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. And during this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors and students on behalf of the following schools. From New South Wales, St Bernard's Primary School, Barawa Heights, and Toongabbie Christian College. From South Australia, Craigieburn Primary School, Flagstaff Hill, and from Victoria, Glen Allen Special School, Glen Waverley. Australia's Federation Guard is a tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catapult party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier within the Hall of Memory. If you're able, I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Party, attention! Party, present arms.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are young and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is birth by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts, of beauty rich and rare. In history's page let every state advance Australia fair. In joyful strains then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Catapult party, shoulder arms. Catapult party, order arms.
Students, you may be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Flight Sergeant Malcolm Robert Burgess. Malcolm Burgess was born on the 9th of June 1922 in the Sydney suburb of Vaucluse, the son of Dulcie and Charles Burgess. Burgess grew up in the Vaucluse, attending a local primary school before going on to Sydney Grammar in 1933. While at school, he played rugby union and would later go on to play in the Burke Cup team. Burgess was also a keen yachtsman and was a member of the Vaucluse Amateur Sailing Association. After finishing his studies at Grammar, Burgess went to work as a salesman for Sydney Snow Limited in Pitt Street while studying for the matriculation exam to enter Sydney University. He took the exam in 1941 but was unsuccessful. With the Second World War raging, Burgess enrolled in the Royal Australian Air Force Reserve in late December 1941. On the 20th of June 1942, just weeks after his 20th birthday, Burgess travelled to Sydney, where he joined the Royal Australian Air Force. After completing his initial training, he was accepted for training as aircrew. Burgess embarked from Brisbane on the 3rd of October, destined for training in Canada as part of the Empire Air Training Scheme. Over the next 11 months, Burgess underwent intense training as an air gunner, and in early 1943, he was awarded his Air Gunner's badge and promoted to sergeant. By mid-October, Burgess had been transferred to England, where he joined an operational training unit. He met his new crewmates, including fellow Australian pilot officer Roland Ward. They were the only Australians in the 7-man crew, and as Burgess would be the crew's rear gunner, he would be Ward's eyes at the back of the aircraft. Burgess and his crewmates were posted to No. 50 Squadron, Royal Air Force, based at Waddington, on the 17th of May 1944. At this stage of the war, England was a hive of activity as preparations for the Allied invasion of France, known as D-Day, neared completion. As part of the wider D-Day operations, aircraft from RAF's Bomber Command struck German targets around Allied landing sites to disrupt German defences as much as possible. On the night of the 5th and 6th of June 1944, Lancaster bombers from No. 50 Squadron were sent to bomb a German artillery unit located around the village of Saint-Pierre-du-Mont. This German unit had the ability to fire on the Allied landing points at Point du Hoc and Omaha Beach, and the unit's destruction would mean one less obstacle for the seaborne forces to overcome. Lancaster Arthur Roger, flown by Ward and with Burgess's rear gunner, took part in the operation. After bombing the target, Arthur Roger was hit by flak and began to burn. Ward gave the order to bail out, but only one crewman, Flight Sergeant Keith Reading, the mid-upper turret gunner, managed to do so. After being repatriated to England, he was able to give an account of the loss of his crewmates and their aircraft. Burgess and the other 6 members of the crew were initially posted as missing, and it was not until 1945 that the deaths of all crew members were confirmed. Malcolm Burgess was days short of his 22nd birthday. The dead airmen were initially buried in a battlefield graves by American soldiers. Burgess's remains were later located in Saint Laurent-sur-Mer Cemetery and reinterred in the Bayeux War Ceremony next to his compatriot, Pilot Officer Roland Ward. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, amongst almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. An image of his headstone is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Flight Sergeant Malcolm Robert Burgess, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
Party, shoulder,
shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Catapult Party, present arms. Catapult Party, shoulder arms.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Catapult Party, inwards, turn. Catapult Party, quick march.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.